Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today, we have with us L.M. Stamper, who's the Managing Director with Evermore Wealth. And today, we're going to be talking about his SGD process. Stamp, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Hey, so get us started with what your process is. I love when people have a blueprint, a proprietary process, because it makes me feel like you've got some things figured out and I can trust the steps you're going to take me through. So what made you think in your financial planning firm that you needed a process in the first place? And then we'll dive into what the S, the G, and the D are.
Certainly. So I think it starts with simplicity. So when we're talking about financial planning, we're talking about saving for retirement. I think there's a lot of financial noise out there. If numbers or money isn't something that you're really into, I think it can get overwhelming. So really, this was really born out of the idea that I like to make finances simple. My specific clientele, when we work together, I'm very education based. And so that they're not overwhelmed with a bunch of charts and graphs and long words that probably don't mean anything to them. Over the years, our firm developed an idea and a process that says, look, let's take things 1, 2, and 3, make that part simple as it relates to saving your money. Now, obviously, behind the scenes, there's some more things you have to do that are a little more intricate. But at a very high level, saving for retirement or even just saving for the future isn't really that difficult. So my process and my firm's process really revolves around that, making it simple so that somebody can just say, all right, I need to do A, B, and C.
So the S could stand for simplicity, but I know it stands for save. But here's something that I love how you phrase that is I've heard it said that people are striving for, longing for a transformation. So in your case, you're guiding your clients to a transformation in their finances, retirement, but they don't necessarily need to understand right now the transportation. They don't need to understand how you're going to get me there. Please tell me about the transformation. And then they just kind of walk in lockstep with you as you guide them through the process. And not that they don't care about the way to get there, but at first, please just convince me that you can get me to my transformation. So I really like the way that you phrase that with the starting point of educating. So let's start with what is the S in your process?
Sure. So the S is save. So it's kind of born from Stamp's 3 rules, which is kind of a mini version of what I do during seminars when I'm first meeting with clients. But the first step is to save. And you might say, well, of course, Stamp, of course, we know we have to save, but it's a little bit more than that. So for instance, saving 15 to 20% minimum of your gross income. And let me talk a little bit about that. So when I say save, I don't necessarily mean put money in a savings account exclusively. I mean, save 15 to 20% of your gross income in areas that you can access for later on down the road. So maybe some of that money goes into a savings account, some goes into a 401k, some goes into an investment account. The idea is to every month, every year, depending on how you get compensated, is to take a percentage, regardless of how much income you're earning, and put that away for the future.
Now, that reminds me of a book I read years and years ago. Have you ever heard of or read The Richest Man in Babylon?
Yes.
Yep. So it's not a proprietary concept, but yet you're right. Start with that. And right off the top, and you might say, oh, I only earn X. So start now so that you're in the habit of that 15 to 20%, so that as your income grows, maybe you get that bump in your income, maybe raise or bonuses. So, let your standard of living increase a little bit, but keep that 15 to 20 because down the road, boy, that's going to compound nicely.
Absolutely. And then you said something that's really important. It's 15 to 20% of your current income. And as your income increases, so should the 15 to 20%. It should increase in lockstep with your income. So the day that you go from earning, $100,000 a year to $200,000 a year, that doesn't change the 15 to 20%. And I get the question of why is the minimum or why do we start with that 15 to 20? and that just boils down to the laws of money. So money is naturally just going to grow at a certain pace. Now, does that mean sometimes we're going to get 20, 30% returns because it's a good year? Sure. But overall, if you take the statistics from all the asset classes out there, money's going to grow at a certain rate. And that rate can be anywhere from maybe 4% to 10%. So naturally, if we take that into account and we couple that with the 15 to 20% of your gross income, if a person can consistently do that through their working years, that rate of saving, that 15 to 20 plus percent, that rate of saving will allow them to walk into retirement with a lifestyle that was similar to what they had when they were working, because the paycheck stopped. So that asset pool, those pools of assets, when you get to your 60s or 70s or whenever you choose to retire, they have to generate a similar type of income, right, that you had when you were working to keep your lifestyle. And that 15 to 20% minimum will facilitate that. It's really hard to do when you're only saving 10%. It's really hard to do if you're saving 5, but your boss is matching the other 5. So it really, from a mathematical standpoint, if you can do more than 20.
I've heard it said the phrase non-negotiables. So in our life, from a life coaching standpoint, you need to have non-negotiables where you do the certain things. Well, if this is and when this is a non-negotiable, that 15 to 20, you're not even looking at the rest of your money. You're starting with that. You know what you need for the future, and now it's building and growing, like you said. So, what else do we need to know about saving, or do we move on to the next letter of G in your process?
Yeah, let's move to G.
So G is what?
Oh, okay. So G is grow. So yes. Now we have to grow the money. Now, what I mean by that is once you put your money off away for the future, you need to ensure that you're getting a fair rate of return on those dollars, a fair growth rate. And when I say fair, again, we all know that there are going to be years where we have really good returns, 20, 25%. Oh, this stock did 40%. But realistically, again, we come back to averages. We want to at least plan as if we're going to have a certain type of average. Now, what that also means when I say fair rate of return is you don't have to sacrifice a rate of return. You don't have to put your money in the bank or in a coffee can and get 0 or 1% because we're not even keeping up with inflation. So as I'm putting 15 to 20% of my income away, I want to make sure I'm getting a fair rate of return collectively on all the dollars that I'm saving. Because again, these monies are put in different environments, from a savings account to an employer sponsored plan, et cetera. So the G is grow, but grow it safely and productively and consistently. Another thing I tell clients is that you always want on your balance sheet every year some asset that goes up. And what I mean by that is you're going to have years where some assets go down. I mean, let's take where, currently right now, we're about -10, -15% to start the year in the market. Well, if we fast forward and say that's what the year is going to end up like, let's say it's a -17% year in the S&P 500 by the time we get to the end of the year, you should somewhere on your balance sheet have money that grew in 2022. Yep. There always has to be a combination of consistent growth along with variable growth. But overall, it should be a fair rate of return.
And where does risk come into fair rate of return? Because I would venture to say that if you are working with someone who is in their 30s, then they could take and tolerate a little bit more risk than someone in their 50s, 60s. So talk a little bit about the risk. And I know that you work specifically with women. So is risk a different factor that a woman needs to take into consideration in planning for their retirement?
Well, absolutely. So age is really, like you said, Mike, age is probably the first thing that we look at. So if I'm working with an individual and she's, 33 years old, the amount of risk that we're going to have in her savings strategy is going to be different than my other client who is 63 years old or 53 years old. So the rate of return, the fair rate of return is really a combined rate, meaning what overall on my balance sheet between the account balances, where they are and how much I'm putting in there, what is my collective average rate of return? And that average rate of return is going to be a blend of things that we're doing on the risk side and things that we're doing on the safe side. But again, each person's individual risk tolerance also plays a part into that. I have some clients that say, look, I don't want any money in the stock market. And if a person says that, it's fine. There's strategies out there to grow your money just as productively outside of the market. But you have some individuals that are a little bit more of a risk taker, and they say, hey, we can put 70, 80, 90% of the strategy in the market. We can then move into real estate. We can then move into business ownership, some more advanced strategies. But ultimately, at the end of the day, risk is a combination between the age of that individual and how long until she retires, and then just her own personal risk tolerance.
Yep. Yeah, that's such a huge point. And I think that if you have someone that is very risk averse, there might be some things you could say, well, you should consider. But if someone is dead set on, having low risk, then let's go down that path. Because I think that that's something where I know that you would listen to the needs of your clients and not try to push them into something more risky just because you've seen it in the past with the other clients. If this is your risk tolerance level, good. Let's move in that lane. And I think that's something really huge to keep in mind.
Well, I'll tell you, Mike, it's funny. I say this and without a proper meeting around it, people don't understand it, but I tell folks all the time, you can get 6% in the stock market, you can get 6% out of the market. There are strategies that you can completely remove all of the risk, and you ultimately after tax, after fee return. But quite frankly, people, stock market's fun. It's fun to talk about your portfolio. It's fun to talk about the stock that you got. But the big misconception is I have to put all my money in the market. And if I put it anywhere else, I won't have the same income that I could have. And that's just actually a fallacy.
Yeah, that's really true. So, okay, let's move to the next letter and the D in the process, diversify. Right. And we've touched on it, but how much diversification do you feel like is the best?
So if I'm saving 15 to 20% of my income, I'm getting a fair growth rate collectively on those savings. I then want to diversify where I'm putting that money, that 20% of my income. And it's diversification in a few ways. First, there is a tax diversification. So whether or not we have taxable accounts, tax deferred, or tax-free accounts. And then it's just the type of vehicle diversification. So what kind of vehicles are we using? And is it in the market or out of the market? So when we put money away, again, the 20%, I want to make sure for my client that we have a nice, broad, tax diversified strategy. And the vehicles that we're using are diversified as well. That kind of goes back to what I said earlier. Depending on the vehicle that you're using, that'll really dictate what you can count on that year, whether or not it's going to go up and down for you, whether or not it's going to consistently grow in a smooth curve. So it's a diversification of where you're putting that money, which sometimes even includes real estate, business ownership, and then also the tax diversification. The last thing I want, especially if you're a 43-year-old high income earner, is for you to defer every single dollar that you have, because from a tax perspective, as we know, and we could get into another conversation about where we think taxes are going to go. At a minimum, we want some blend there of tax deferred and tax free.
Nobody knows the future, but we can only assume that taxes are only going to inch on up over the years. So that's a good point about that diversification. It makes me think of something too. Can you diversify too much? Can you have so wide that it's like, you need to pick some buckets there? What are your thoughts that way?
Yeah, I think you can. I think, well, if you're diversifying too much, I would say too much in the sense that you get confused and you start to, those eggs in your baskets, you start to forget where they are and you can't keep an eye on them. And then also, how effective is that diversification? Like maybe I'm diversified amongst 19 different strategies, but if 7 of those strategies really aren't producing anything, what good is it to be that diversified? Not to mention, at the end of the day, I tell people this all the time, there's only so many places you can put your money.
Yep.
We can stretch out all the different, vehicles and nooks and crannies, but at the end of the day, you just kind of run out of places to put money. I mean, I guess that's why they got NFTs now. They had to create something new. Yep. But for the most part, there's really 6, 7, 8 strategies that a person can do.
Now, do you work with people? What percentage of your clients are still in corporate America and have, maybe qualified plans or 401ks that you then are advising, as opposed to maybe self-employed that have some flexibility in what they can do with their retirement funds?
I would say, because of my target market, which, are professional working women over 40, and even our bread and butter is a little bit of women in the sports industry. I would say about 80% or kind of on the W2 side with, with employer plans, and the other 20% are business owners.
So does that, obviously that would change how you work with them, because they do have a certain percentage of their money that they probably are putting into an employer plan because maybe there's a match, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. One of the general rules, and I think most planners agree to this, put your money into the 401k up to the match.
Yeah.
Even if they don't offer a Roth 401k option, which I'm a big fan of Roth 401ks, depending on your scenario, of course, everyone's a little bit different. But for the most part, your average, let's say 40, 45-year-old, working professional with a decent income, we're going to probably suggest she uses the Roth 401k versus the traditional. But either way, if they offer a match, take advantage of the free money.
Otherwise, you're leaving
all taxes.
Yeah, you're leaving money on the table. It's really free money. Yeah. Yep. And you can make cases for, the allocations, but it's free money.
It's free money.
That's a great place to start.
Yeah. Even if it's kind of going back to the 20%. So from an outline standpoint, we want to save 20%. Well, you're getting a 6% dollar for dollar match.
Right.
So 6 of that 20% is going in the 401k.
Not 12. Not 12, exactly. Right? Exactly. So let's have that other 6 be the little kicker.
We don't count that. We don't count. It's 20% of your income.
Yes.
Not you and your bosses.
Love it. Yeah. That's a really good. That's a good clarification.
Yeah. So then sometimes people cheat. They're like, "Hey, Stamp, I'm at 12 already." Like, no. Let's reel that back in, because another thing about that, and I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, is that people kind of forget they can change the match anytime they want. Right. They can just stop the match. They're not legally obligated to keep the match every single year that you work with them. So we really don't count on that. That's kind of
it's your money. So let's just use 6 as the percent, because some employers don't match up to 6. It's 3, 5, whatever. But let's use 6. So the other 4 or the other, whatever number, the 9 to 15%, where should that come from? It's coming from their ready disposable income after their living expenses. So then you're advising them, okay, so now we have X number of dollars to work with on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis. What are some of the things that you would be talking about that way to help them, save, grow, diversify?
Yeah. So it kind of goes back to the individual, right? So
yes,
I pretty much always start with the taxes. What kind of tax situation could she possibly have in the future based on current age, current assets, how far we are until retirement, state that you live in, tax-free versus, state income tax. So we start to then look at things like Roth IRAs, and if she earns too much income, then we could look at the backdoor Roth strategy, as long as they keep that around. We have investment accounts. We have life insurance retirement plans, which are really kind of like a supercharged Roth. We talk about real estate. I'm a big fan. Most advisors that aren't in the real estate world don't really promote real estate for their clients. And quite frankly, because they don't get paid on it.
Right.
Right. So if they're putting X amount of dollars towards a rental house, that's not anything that the advisor gets, but it's the right thing to do for the client, because it's an amazing asset class. So, some of that, like going back to that 14%, some of that money might be going into a future real estate fund, or hey, I'm going to buy into a franchise. So we put that money off to the side. It's really custom made for each individual client, but ultimately at the end of the day, there's some go-tos that we really like, especially Roth money. I love Roth money.
And one of the recurring themes that I'm hearing you talk about is custom plan and developing relationships for the long term. This is not just, here's this thing, buy it, goodbye, see you, because I made my commission and I'm off. This is you getting to know the long-term needs and goals of your clients and making the right recommendations, even if there's an element of that doesn't benefit you and your firm. Absolutely. And so to me, that's a big, a piece of really ethics that you have to think about it that way.
Well, I'm glad you said it. So first and foremost, I'm a fiduciary advisor. And
so you're required to, yeah.
Folks that don't know that, I'm required to put my client's best interest in front of mine. And I think the only way you can do that is to prove it.
Yep.
And I think once you start working with folks and you tell them things like, hey, I think instead of putting money in the investment account, I think you should look at buying some real estate. Add that to your portfolio, helping clients with things that you don't get compensated on, like taxes, or if they're going to buy a new house, offer to look at the mortgage documents, etc. So my process is absolutely relationship based. The idea is I want to retire you early, and then I want to make sure that you're getting as much retirement income as safely and as tax efficient as possible. So you're talking about the next 20, 30, 40 years of your life having to deal with me. So I don't know how good of a proposition that is, but you might get stuck with me for, 30 plus years if we start working together.
You might just have to take my good advice and my wonderful charm and my, my putting your needs ahead of all of that good stuff.
Live on a six-figure tax-free income. I know it sounds terrible.
And if any of that sounds good to someone listening to this, let's wrap up with this, Dan. Yeah. What's the best way someone can reach out, learn more about what you do, and then connect and kind of see what kind of recommendations and custom plan you could put together for them?
Absolutely. So I always tell folks the easiest way is to just Google LM Stamper. As you can tell, Mike, everybody calls me Stamp. It's just a family tradition. But LM Stamper, if you Google that, you'll see my website, Facebook page, LinkedIn page. And on my website, I have, some different areas you can go to contact us, but you can also go to talktostamp.com, and that just goes right to my calendar. So if you want to book a quick 15-minute call just to see if we're a good fit, because quite frankly, we're not a good fit for everyone, you can just do that as well. But again, if you just Google LM Stamper, you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was a really pleasure to talk to you today, Stamp, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.